I spent 22 years walking the same concrete floor, steel-toed boots echoing under flickering fluorescence. The smell of machine oil soaked so deep into my clothes it felt like a second skin. Not once in those 22 years did we have a major accident. Not one fire, not one missing limb, not one death. And you know what they gave me? A cardboard box and a 2-week timer. My name's Kenny Harmon. I'm 59 years old, and until recently, I was the lead foreman at Western Plains Manufacturing in Tulsa, Oklahoma. If you're picturing some dusty little shop that sells bolts and bearings, think again. We built the kind of stuff you don't notice until it breaks and someone dies. Valves and pressure equipment for oil refineries. Heavy duty, high pressure, no room for error kind of work. Mistakes in our world don't mean oops. They mean explosions. They mean lawsuits. They mean body bags. I wasn't just some guy clocking in and out. I built the safety protocols, trained every single technician and supervisor, and created the maintenance cycles that kept our equipment and our people alive. And yet, on a cold Monday morning that still feels like a sucker punch to the ribs, I was summoned by Patricia from HR and her sidekick Leonard Wright, the new operations director who still had tags on his clipboard. You ever met a man who smells like starch and software? That's Leonard. 4 months on the job, never set foot on my floor aside from the photo op they called a safety tour. And here he was, sitting in a spotless conference room with a spreadsheet pulled up like he was about to present a PowerPoint on my irrelevance. Kenny, Patricia began in that HR voice you hear when someone's about to tell you your dog died. We're implementing some operational changes. She slid a folder across the table like it contained my winning lottery numbers. Leonard chimed in, market pressures, competitive restructuring. Translation, you're old, expensive, and inconvenient. I opened the folder. Severance. 2 weeks to train the guy replacing me. Half my pension would vest now, the rest dripped out monthly. Jason Weber, 28 years old, business degree. I'd worked longer than he'd been alive, and then Patricia added the cherry on top. He'll be shadowing you starting tomorrow. Like I was a ghost already. I nodded, didn't argue, didn't cry, didn't ask, why me? Because I already knew. It wasn't personal, it was surgical. They weren't cutting fat, they were cutting memory. They were cutting legacy. That night, I drove home the long way, past the riverfront where the old oil refineries used to hiss and moan into the Tulsa night. That's where my father worked, before the jobs went south, before men like him, and eventually me, became replaceable. He used to tell me, Kenny, your worth isn't in what you say, it's in what you build. And I'd built something, not just machines, not just output. I built a culture, a code, a way of keeping men safe in a place built to break them. And now I had 2 weeks to hand all that over to a kid who didn't know which end of a wrench to hold. I called Frank that night, my old buddy who'd retired the year before. They're letting me go, I said. Bastards, he replied without missing a beat. You gonna raise hell? No, I said, but they'll find out. You can't fake experience. Not forever. I hung up and stared at my work boots by the door. 22 years of grime that soap could never touch. They didn't know what they were losing, or maybe they did, and just didn't care. Let me tell you something they won't print in the annual reports. That factory floor? It's alive. It breathes through its machines. It speaks in clanks, whirs, and hisses. It tells you things, if you're willing to listen. And I listened, for decades. I knew the exact moment when the number 3 press got sluggish. I could smell a bad hydraulic line before it leaked. I could feel a 2-degree change in ambient temperature just walking in from the break room. That wasn't training. That was instinct. And instinct can't be taught in 2 weeks. Purye de Ponker Jason showed up that Tuesday in shiny dress shoes and a polo that screamed management retreat. He had a firm handshake and the kind of smile that belongs on a cereal box. I'm excited to learn from you, he said. What he meant was, I'll pretend to care until you're gone. He carried a tablet like it was sacred text and kept pointing at charts I'd never seen. We can increase efficiency by 18% if we consolidate shifts, he told me. I handed him steel-toed boots and a pair of scratched-up safety glasses. Floor tour first, I said. Metrics later. Over the next 2 weeks, I showed him everything. The schedules, the safety walkthroughs, the quirks of each operator, the personalities, the unwritten rules. But he missed it all. Didn't ask Diego about his son in the Marines. Didn't remember Alicia needed brakes for her diabetes. Didn't know that the two milling machine needed to be sweet-talked on cold mornings. He wasn't learning. He was inventorying, and he was missing the point. On my second-to-last day, I overheard him in the break room talking to Leonard. Once we implement the new shift schedule, we can eliminate 2 maintenance positions, Jason said. And those extra safety checks on the hydraulic press? Totally unnecessary. Not in the manual. Leonard beamed like he'd just been promised a bonus. They didn't see me standing behind the vending machine. But I saw them, heard them, felt that cold sink in my stomach like rust on a gear. They weren't updating the system. They were dismantling it. And when that happens in a factory like ours, people bleed. That evening, I called a parking lot meeting. Not official, not documented. Just me, Diego, Alicia, Sam from maintenance, and Russell from night shift. I told them the truth. They're cutting corners. Jason doesn't know what he doesn't know. And Leonard, he doesn't care. What do you want us to do? Diego asked. You're not management anymore, Alicia reminded me gently. No, I said. But you can document, photograph, note everything. If something feels off, don't report it to the bosses. Report it to me. I handed them index cards with my personal number. They looked at me like soldiers being handed a secret code before battle, because that's what this was. The next morning, I turned in my keys. No speeches, no plaque, not even a cheap sheet cake. Just Patricia handing me a manila envelope and Jason already rearranging my desk. Any last advice? He asked, tapping on his tablet. I paused. Yeah. Listen to the machines. They talk to you, if you know how to hear it. He smiled like I'd quoted a fortune cookie. I walked out into the sunlight with 22 years behind me, and no one clapped, no one cheered, no one noticed. But I wasn't done. 3 weeks passed before Diego called. They're pushing hydraulic press inspections to every 2 weeks instead of weekly, he said, whispering like he was in a spy movie. Document it, I told him. Listen for hissing, feel for heat, record everything. 2 days later, Sam called. They rejected my parts order for the backup generator, he said. Told me to wait until quarterly inventory. I began logging everything. Every skipped maintenance check, every denied request, every small failure. I knew it wouldn't take long before the cracks turned into canyons. At week 6, it happened. A belt slipped on the number 3 press. 2 hours of downtime. No injuries, just a whisper of what was coming. Then week 7, a minor hydraulic leak. Then week 8, 3 electrical shorts. One nearly sparked a fire. Russell called me after each one. Jason says it's the equipment. Blames you for letting it get old. My jaw clenched. That equipment had purred under my care. They weren't blaming the machines. They were blaming the man who used to listen to them. And that was it. I picked up the phone and called the State Industrial Safety Board. Told them everything. Not just vague concerns, but specifics. Dates, patterns, names. Helen Barnes, an inspector I trusted, listened closely. We'll conduct an unannounced inspection in the next 2 weeks, she promised. I felt a flicker of justice, until 3 days later, Diego called again. They know, Kenny. Someone told management it was you. They're going nuclear. They were shredding documents, sanitizing logs, cleaning the floors with toothbrushes, falsifying maintenance reports like students cheating on finals. And then came the letter. Hand-delivered by courier. Western Plains Manufacturing accused me of interfering with business operations and violating my non-disclosure agreement. They threatened to sue. I called my lawyer, Bill Henderson. They're bluffing, he said. You haven't shared proprietary info, but they can still make your life hell with legal fees. Can they stop the inspection? I asked. No, but Kenny, tread carefully. These people don't fight fair. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound, staring at that legal letter like it might start bleeding. It wasn't the threat of a lawsuit that got to me. It was the tactic, the audacity. They were fixing everything I warned about, right down to the bolt, and still had the guts to threaten me for saying something. They were scrubbing the crime scene and blaming the witness. So I did the only thing left that made sense. I doubled down. I called Helen Barnes again. "Remember that inspection?" I asked. "Yes, it's scheduled for next Thursday." "Why?" "Because they're covering up the rot, faking logs, intimidating staff." Helen paused. "I had a feeling something was off last time. I'll elevate this. You'll need a supervisor." "I already called her," she said. That gave me a sliver of hope, but a sliver wasn't enough. That Friday, my doorbell rang. It was Russell, big guy, quiet eyes, loyal to a fault. He looked like a man carrying a weight he didn't know how to drop. "I needed to see you off-site," he said. I nodded and waved him in. He pulled a thumb drive from his pocket and handed it to me like it was radioactive. "What's this?" "Proof," he said. "Real maintenance logs. The fake ones they submitted. Emails from Leonard to Axiom." I opened the laptop and plugged it in. What I saw made my stomach twist. They'd been planning this. The personnel reshuffle, the budget cuts, the hiring of junior supervisors, the elimination of maintenance redundancies, all of it. It wasn't just carelessness, it was strategy. "Honey." One email stood out, burned into my memory like a scar. From a senior executive at Axiom, "Insurance covers accidents. Missed earnings targets cost us investors." They weren't unaware of the risks. They calculated them, planned for them, as if human injury was just another line item in a spreadsheet. Russell leaned in. "There's more. Jason knows. Look at these." He showed me Jason's name approving, or rather denying, dozens of maintenance requests, each stamped, "Defer to Q2, budget constraint." Backups, sensors, redundancy switches, critical fail-safes, all denied. I looked at Russell. "Why are you bringing me this? You could lose your job." He blinked hard. "My niece, Alicia's nephew, got hurt." I froze. Press guard failed. The one Jason said wasn't critical to replace. Kid's 19, lost 2 fingers. I pushed away from the table, stood there shaking. "They're calling it operator error." Had him sign forms while he was still on morphine. Something in me snapped. This wasn't business anymore. This was betrayal. After Russell left, I made 3 phone calls. One to Diego, one to Alicia, one to Frank. We agreed to meet the next day at Frank's house. Off-site, no phones. It felt like planning a heist. Eight of us sat in that living room, each with decades in the plant, each with stories, scars, and reasons to act. I laid out everything. The thumb drive, the maintenance denials, the safety failures, the emails. "So what do we do?" Diego asked. "Go to the media?" Frank said. "Not yet," I replied. "First we build leverage. Then we bring the hammer." Over the next 2 weeks, I became a ghost haunting the halls I once walked. I didn't step foot on the property, but I was everywhere. My phone buzzed daily, sometimes hourly. Shift reports, equipment failures, photos, voicemails from Diego, whispering in closets, screenshots from Alicia of bloodied gloves, faulty readouts, overworked temps. I logged everything. And in the meantime, I made 3 key moves. I reached out to George Lawson, now an executive at Meridian, Western Plains' largest client. We met at a diner 20 miles out, a place where the coffee tasted like burnt hope, but no one would recognize us. "Good to see you, Kenny," he said, shaking my hand. "I wish it was under better circumstances." I showed him photos. Defective valves, welds that wouldn't hold under heat, pressure ratings falsified. George stared, pale. "These passed inspection? With the new system?" "Yes." He nodded grimly. "Safety's non-negotiable. I'll initiate a quality audit." That was a win. So I gave her everything Russell had provided and more. Names, logs, emails, footage. Proof that Western Plains was engaging in systemic safety negligence. She didn't just nod. She took notes. Detailed ones. "This is going above me," she said. Some are the wild card. I didn't know if he'd flip or fold, so I asked him to lunch. To my surprise, he came. The guy looked 10 years older than the last time I saw him. Dark circles, loose collar, shaky hands. "I appreciate you meeting me," I started. He nodded, eyes darting. "How's the floor?" He laughed bitterly. "A disaster." "Did they tell you what you were walking into?" He shook his head. "They said the floor was outdated, that you were resistant to change. But Kenny, every time I fix one thing, 3 more break." I leaned in. "That's because you tore out a system, and systems don't like being dismantled." I tried to bring back the inspections. Leonard shut it down. Of course he did. But here's the thing. In 2 weeks, you're going to be visited by the safety board, and Meridian is going to audit every valve you've shipped. Jason's face dropped. "You threatening me?" "No, I'm giving you a choice." "Document everything," I said. "Every denied request, every conversation, every time they made you cut corners." He stared at his food. "They'll fire me." "Maybe, but you'll sleep at night." I handed him a card. "You've got 1 week." 3 days later, he texted, "I'm in. What do you need?" The dominoes were lining up. We just needed one final push. And then it came, like fate clearing its throat. The #1 hydraulic press, the heart of the floor, exploded. Not violently, not like in the movies, but enough to stop production cold, enough to trigger whispers, enough to wake the sleeping wolves. My phone rang at 6:15 a.m. Leonard Wright, strained, nervous, panicked. "Kenny," he said, "we have a situation." "I heard," I replied flatly. "We need your expertise. The press is down. Production's frozen. Orders are backlogged. You fired the guy who could have prevented this. Kenny, please, we're willing to bring you back. As a consultant, cash, $300 an hour." I almost laughed. He thought this was about money. "I'll come in," I said, "on 3 conditions." He waited. "I bring my team. Diego, Alicia, Russell. I get full authority on repair and parts. And I want 6 months' worth of maintenance logs." Long pause. "Fine," Leonard said. "Whatever it takes." I arrived like a storm cloud. The floor buzzed. Not with machinery, but tension. Jason met me first. "Thank God," he said. "Let's work." What we found was exactly what I predicted. Layer upon layer of mechanical negligence. A perfect storm of deferred maintenance, skipped procedures, and corner cutting. We got to work. 3 days. Sweat, noise, steel. And while we worked, I sent a final email. Subject: findings and formal complaint, safety negligence. 2, Axiom Corporate, Helen Barnes, Meridian Energy with attachments. Dozens of them. It was a bomb disguised as a spreadsheet, and it landed hard. By day 3, the fallout began. Meridian suspended all orders. The safety board arrived unannounced, with backup. And Axiom? They sent a team from HQ. Leonard was gone by noon. Reassigned. Jason stayed, but under new management. The new director, Thomas Whitfield, called me into his temporary office. "I read your report," he said. "Thorough. Disturbingly thorough." I said nothing. "We want to offer you Director of Operations. Full control, full salary, big bump." I shook my head. "No." "Why?" "Because safety isn't seasonal. I don't do quarterly ethics." He raised an eyebrow. "Then what do you want?" "I'll consult. 3 days a week, my rate, my team. No red tape. I train your replacements. I fix what you broke. But I never wear your badge again." He paused, then nodded. "Deal." So I walked back onto the floor, not as an employee, but as the ghost who refused to die. The machines purred a little louder, like they knew. Their old caretaker had returned, and he was not done building. You'd think taking down a corrupt manager would feel like a victory. It didn't, at least not right away. Because while Leonard was gone and Jason humbled, Western Plains was still Western Plains. The same corporate blood still pumped through its metal veins. Same boardroom, same shareholders, same greed, just wearing a different tie. Fixing the press was just the first layer. What came next was digging out the rot buried deep beneath the factory floor. Thomas Whitfield, the new director, was sharp, but sharp in a way I'd seen before. MBA smart, spreadsheet fluent, good at nodding during meetings and promising reform without saying anything concrete. He offered olive branches in the form of policy reviews and internal task forces. But I wasn't there for committees. I was there to rebuild a system designed to keep people alive, to fix what they'd broken. And let me tell you, when you dig into corporate damage, it's never just one thing. It's never just Leonard screwed up. No, it's culture. It's incentives. It's death by budget cut. I started my 3-day-a-week consulting gig like a man returning to a battlefield. But this time, I wasn't alone. Diego, Alicia, Russell, they weren't just my crew anymore. They were the front line. We reviewed everything, from procurement systems to safety redundancies, maintenance schedules, parts vendors, even employee onboarding. And what we found was jaw-dropping. They'd outsourced over 30% of critical component manufacturing to overseas contractors that didn't follow the same safety standards. Training programs had been reduced from 6 weeks to 10 days. And worst of all, disciplinary action for skipped safety checks? Zero. Nada. Nothing. Employees had been getting warnings for being 5 minutes late, but not a peep when they skipped the mandatory equipment diagnostics. It wasn't just a policy failure, it was institutional negligence. Could you or not come? I remember standing in the old inspection bay one afternoon when Alicia approached me. She was holding a report, red flagged. This was signed off, she said, but the part never got installed. What part? Emergency release valve for the turbine line. I took the report and flipped through the pages, signed by a name I didn't recognize. New guy, she said, brought in during the efficiency phase. I looked up at her. That turbine line has been running hot lately. I know. Pull it offline, now. She didn't hesitate, and just like that, we avoided another disaster. But I couldn't stop wondering, how many near misses had we missed? One night, after another 12-hour day of peeling back Western Plains lies, I got a call from George Lawson at Meridian. We got our audit results, he said. And? 2/3 of your last shipment failed under stress testing. Subpar welds. Fluctuating pressure tolerances. He paused. I've pulled your plant from active supplier status until we see systemic change. I wasn't surprised, but it still hit hard. 30 years of reputation, gone in 1 quarter. That's how quickly it can all fall apart. Thomas called me into the office the next morning. He looked like a man with ulcers. We need to talk, he said, shutting the door. I've already heard, I replied. Meridian. Yes, but it's not just them. Horizon Engineering is reviewing contracts. Apex Pipeline halted their orders. You've started a chain reaction. No, I corrected him. Leonard started it. You just inherited the fire. Thomas sat down. I need your help containing this. You don't contain this, I said. You survive it, then you rebuild. He leaned back in his chair. God help us. The rest of the week was a blur. We held emergency trainings, pulled entire sections offline, had staff retrained, sometimes from scratch, and slowly, painfully, things stabilized. But that wasn't enough for me. I didn't just want the plant safe. I wanted justice for what had happened, for the kid who lost his fingers, for the workers pressured into silence, for every single red flag buried under quarterly targets. And to get that justice, I needed to take the fight higher. I called Bill Henderson, my lawyer. Can we sue Axiom? I asked bluntly. He sighed. Technically, sure. But you're talking about a billion-dollar firm with a fortress of lawyers. What's your angle? Negligence, breach of duty, injury by systemic policy. He paused. Are you willing to go public? I didn't answer right away. I knew what that meant. Court cases, media, being labeled the disgruntled former employee, becoming a cautionary tale. But then I thought of Alicia's nephew, his bandaged hands, his future rewritten by someone else's budget. Yes, I said, I'm in. Bill got to work, and so did we. We built a dossier so thorough it looked like a criminal investigation. Hundreds of pages, statements, emails, photos, whistleblower logs, maintenance reports, security footage, every shortcut, every cover-up. And with that in hand, we approached the media. Plakinakariura, the first reporter we contacted, didn't bite. Too risky, too industrial, no audience. The second one? Same. But the third, a journalist named Evelyn Park from the Tulsa Ledger, she saw the story. More than that, she felt it. "Let me come to the plant," she said. "I want to see the people behind this." I cleared it with Thomas. He wasn't thrilled, but he knew the tides were changing. Evelyn toured the floor, met the crew, and asked real questions, not just headlines. When her story dropped a week later, it exploded. Beneath the valves, the human cost of corporate efficiency, front page. It featured interviews with workers, photos of failed parts, anonymized quotes from internal emails, and a quote from me. "You can't quantify trust on a spreadsheet, but you sure as hell know when it's gone." The reaction was immediate. Oman and one social media blew up. Justice for Tulsa trended for 3 straight days. News crews camped outside Western Plains. Thomas went into crisis mode. An Axiom, they called, their lawyers, their PR team, their damage control unit. They offered a settlement package, not just for me, but for every injured or terminated worker tied to safety failures. They even offered to pay for Alicia's nephew's medical bills and therapy. It felt like a win, but I knew better. This was hush money, a blanket over a fire. I declined. I told them they could do better, and I had a condition: full reinstatement of original safety systems across all facilities under Axiom's management, audited by an independent board. They balked, so I leaked the terms of the offer to Evelyn. Her follow-up piece was sharper than the first. After that, Axiom folded, not because they wanted to, but because public opinion left them no choice. They agreed to the conditions, and more. They invited me to sit on an independent safety oversight board, and I accepted, with one caveat: I wouldn't be paid a dime. I wasn't doing this for money. I was doing this to make sure no one else had to go through what we did. Alright, Q1 6 months later, things look different. Western Plains runs smoother than it has in years. Accidents? Down to near zero. Retention? Better than ever. Jason? He's still there, under the right leadership now. He stops by my office sometimes, still learning, still trying. And me? I walk the floor every week, steel-toed boots, coffee in hand, smelling the machines, listening, because the floor still speaks, and I still answer. It's not about revenge. It never really was. It's about responsibility, about remembering that behind every valve, every bolt, every unit shipped, there's a name, a face, a family. And for the first time in a long time, they're finally listening. If people think when the headlines fade, the story ends, they're wrong. Sometimes the real work starts after the spotlight dies down. Western Plains didn't transform overnight. No factory does. You don't reverse 2 decades of damage with a single article or a settlement check. What you do is show up, one bolt at a time, one system at a time, one person at a time. The first few months after the media storm were fragile. Morale was cautious. Workers smiled, but their eyes watched every corner. Trust doesn't rebuild like steel. It grows like bone, slow, painful, and only after it's been broken. Thomas, for all his corporate polish, surprised me. He didn't run. He didn't delegate it away. He stayed, took the meetings, faced the backlash, owned the failures he hadn't created. And because of that, we started to believe him. Little by little. We formed a permanent safety action council made up of floor workers, not just managers. Each department had a seat. Each shift had a voice. Even the temps, who were previously treated like replaceable parts, got representation. We rewrote the manuals, not to simplify them, but to humanize them. Now every procedure had a reason. Every checklist had a name behind it. Not step 4, engage lockout tagout, but step 4, This prevents fingers like Javier's from being lost again. I watched Jason grow too. He started asking real questions, taking off his tie, walking the floor without his tablet glued to his hand. He even started a new program, Boots Before Bites. Every new supervisor had to spend 2 full weeks on the floor. No screens, no spreadsheets, just listening. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Then came the ripple effects. Meridian reinstated Western Plains as a preferred vendor, under strict quarterly audits. Horizon followed. Then Apex. But this time, we weren't chasing quotas. We were building reputations the right way, from scratch. One morning, I arrived early and saw something that stopped me cold. Diego was training a new hire. Young kid, nervous. And he was showing him how to check the hydraulic pressure gauge. Not just how to read it, but what it meant. If it spikes here, Diego said, tapping the gauge, you don't just log it, you shut it down. Even if we miss quota, the kid asked. Diego nodded. Especially then. And I knew we were winning. But even in all this progress, I kept thinking about the past, about the ones we lost to negligence, about the times I could have spoken up louder, about the people who were almost forgotten. So I made a call to Evelyn Park. Got one more story for you, I said. She came by that week. This time, no cameras, no notebooks, just her sitting across from me in the same break room I'd once been pushed out of. I want to do a follow-up, she said, but not just about the factory, about the man behind it. I chuckled. Kenny Harmon, the maintenance whisperer? She smiled. No, Kenny Harmon, the man who listened. You want to read the words? In the story dropped under the headline, Legacy and Steel, How Listening Saved a Factory. And this time it wasn't about scandal. It was about redemption, about second chances, about what happens when people stop following orders and start asking why. So a few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail from Alicia's nephew, the kid who'd lost 2 fingers. He wrote, I used to think I was just unlucky, that the machine got me and that's all there was. But now I see it was bigger than that. I read what you did, what everyone did, and it means more than I can say. I'm going back to school, gonna study industrial design. Maybe I can build machines that don't need warning signs. Thank you, I cried. Not the angry kind of tears that burn, the quiet ones, the ones that say it was worth it. People ask me now if I miss being full-time. I don't. Not in the way they mean. I don't miss the 14-hour shifts, the migraines from fluorescent lights, the stress of being responsible for everything that could go wrong. But I do miss the hum, that low, steady vibration of purpose, the sound of machines running right, the sound of people walking in without fear. So I still walk the floor, once a week, not because I have to, but because I want to. Sometimes someone pulls me aside with a concern. A new hire asks about a tool. A shift lead shows me something that doesn't look quite right, and I listen, like I always have, because that's what started this whole journey. Not a spreadsheet, not a lawsuit, not a headline, but listening. When and in the end, that's the legacy I care about. Not a nameplate, not a pension, not even the title of director or consultant, but a culture. A truth that stays long after I'm gone. A truth that says, machines don't make a factory safe. People do. Sometimes justice looks like a courtroom. Other times it looks like a clean press station, a full toolbox, a confident walk into a new shift. Sometimes revenge doesn't roar. It whispers through valves that don't leak, gauges that don't lie, and boots that still echo on floors that finally remember who built them.